The moral argument. The cosmological and teleological arguments are both oriented in an a posteriori way to a world out there, an attempt to derive the existence of a theistic God from premises about that world. The moral argument also involves a reading or interpretation of data, but this time it is to be found not out there, but in here, that is, in our human subjective experience. If we delve into that inner human life, we will, at least according to one philosopher, reach the conclusion that there must be God, who or whatever that is, if we are to make sense of our lives, and especially our moral experience. The so-called moral argument for the existence of God does not set out to prove or establish God's existence, but rather to persuade us that morality does not make sense without God. The starting point is our sense of duty. Kant puts it rather poetically when he says, quote, "Two things fill the mind with ever new increasing admiration and awe, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me."
According to Kant, duty requires us to do morality. That is, to act in accordance with laws or norms that are determined by impartial reason. For example, we should not steal from each other, because stealing, if it were permitted, would undermine community living, which is a necessary facet of being human. Stealing, then, is irrational. If we do morality in this way, we will achieve the highest goal of human existence, the fulfillment of the moral law, and the happiness or total satisfaction that comes about when this happens. Kant calls this outcome the summum bonum, or, quote, the exact coincidence of happiness and morality. Kant can now move the argument forward by appealing to a principle, namely, ought implies can. If we are obliged to achieve the summum bonum, then it must be possible for us to do this.
But here we hit a problem. It might just be possible for us to put reason into practice and live in accordance with universal moral norms. But we cannot guarantee that this will lead to happiness. Indeed, it is a matter of fact that good people do not always avoid unhappiness in this life. In other words, we cannot obtain the summum bonum by ourselves. The conclusion of this, then, is the hypothetical statement: if we are to achieve the summum bonum, then we must assume several truths, what Kant calls the postulates of morality. The first is that we are really free to obey the moral law. The second is that we will survive death, so that the non-achievement of the summum bonum in this life is not final. The third is that God must exist to guarantee that being virtuous will lead ultimately to happiness.
The psychologist Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, believed that our sense of duty could be explained in a different way, and certainly without reference to an external deity. He believed that our sense of duty and moral obligation were derived not from an objective moral law underpinned and sanctioned by reason, but from the human psyche, specifically from what he called the beyond self, or superego.
The aggressive instincts and the sexual and other appetites of human beings are very powerful. Left unchecked, they would give rise to behaviour that would be incompatible with ordered social living. Freud suggested that the self or ego acts as a mediator between individual aggressive desires and the demands of the wider society. This controlling of desires, however, creates a tension that is internalized, along with the sanctions of parents and society, by the subconscious beyond self or superego. Rather than directing aggression outwards towards others, the superego reflects it back on the self, and this is what we mean by the voice of conscience, which both controls the individual and induces a sense of guilt. Conscience, our sense of what we should do, has its roots in the human unconscious and has nothing to do with a supposed objective standard, whether derived from reason or anywhere else. One implication of this is that a person's morality is shaped by the influences and circumstances of their life, and one person's or society's morality may differ from that of another. We will conclude this overview with some reflections on the strengths and weaknesses of the position set out by Kant and Freud.
Kant's defence of an objective moral law that orients us towards a reality, God, that upholds that morality, is supported by many philosophers. Thomas Aquinas argued in the fourth of his 5 ways that gradations of a quality such as goodness point to an objective uttermost that is the cause of those gradations, and this uttermost is God. The philosopher John Hick has remarked that the existence of moral claims that take precedence over all interests is indicative of a belief, quote, in a reality of some kind that is superior to oneself and entitled to obedience. This is at least a move in the direction of God. End quote. Against Kant, Brian Davies has pointed out that, with reference to the summum bonum, it is not illogical that we should aim for something that we might never attain. Furthermore, in a criticism that has echoes of David Hume, Davies asks why should the deity that underpins Kantian objective morality be the God of Judeo-Christian tradition? Quote, why cannot a top-ranking angel do the job?
Against Freud, the Freudian theory of the human psyche is by no means universally accepted. There are rival theories, including those proposed by Erikson and Fromm, that trace our moral awareness to human beliefs that certain things are highly valued. Stealing, then, is wrong means that property and property rights are believed to be central to any society that is to function effectively. There is a much greater rational and cognitive element to morality than Freud's theory is willing to concede.